Bernie Sanders has won the New Hampshire primary election. He narrowly defeated Pete Buttigieg last night. They're both going to end up with the same number of delegates, 9 from New Hampshire. We will have updated total delegate numbers and much, much more coming up. Thank you to the more than 100,000 or so different people that caught at least some piece of last night's results live stream with me on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. We had a great time watching the results develop live, took a bunch of phone calls. It was great. Let's look at the results. And of course, Bernie Sanders jumped to a large lead up front. If you were watching live, you saw Bernie leading by about 12 percentage points towards the beginning of the results coming in. That lead shrank over the course of 2 hours, and it got down to 10 and then 8 and 6 and 5, 4, 3. And then it teetered between 1.5 and 3 percentage points. Ultimately ended with Bernie Sanders defeating Pete by 1.5 percentage points with a popular vote victory of just over 4,200. Now, because New Hampshire awards delegates proportionately, you will notice on screen that Bernie comes away with 9 delegates and Buttigieg also comes away with 9 delegates, 6 delegates for Amy Klobuchar, who really was the overperformer of the night, exactly as expected. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Yesterday, in looking at the polling, I predicted that Amy Klobuchar would be the overperformer of the night. Because if you looked at her polling trajectory, the polls, of course, ending a few days short of the primary. In other words, there were polls released yesterday, but they had only interviewed people up to a couple of days prior. And looking at her trajectory, it was realistic to believe that her surge continued beyond what the latest polls reflected, not fully representative of the Klobuchar surge in New Hampshire. And indeed, that's what happened. So let's now look at polling versus actual results to see who overperformed, who underperformed. And I don't think you'll find the results too surprising. As you can see, Amy Klobuchar overperforming her polling by a massive 8.2 percentage points. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders underperformed by 2.8 points, still won. Joe Biden underperformed by 2.6. Now, interestingly, I got a bunch of emails from people saying, David, Bernie was the biggest underperformer of the night by 2.8. That's true, but Joe Biden's underperformance also involved Joe Biden finishing 5th, right? Joe Biden underperformed and finished 5th. And now, again, more questions about his viability in this entire thing come up. Bernie Sanders underperformed by 2.8, but still ended up winning. So there are the meaning and significance of those underperformances are quite different. Elizabeth Warren gave a strange sort of, it actually was like a concession speech, but not just about New Hampshire. It was almost like she was conceding the entire primary to either Pete or Bernie. She kept talking about, it's still early, we're going to fight, but both Bernie and Pete would be great. I'm going to keep fighting, but we need to rally around the eventual nominee, implying she knows it's not going to be her. And interestingly enough, Donald Trump saw it basically the same way, although Trump laced his commentary with the discriminatory nickname Pocahontas, tweeting last night, quote, Elizabeth Warren, sometimes referred to as Pocahontas, is having a really bad night. I think she is sending signals that she wants out. Calling for unity is her way of getting there, going home, and having a nice cold beer with her husband. This is essentially my analysis, although I don't refer to Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas. But it did seem like Elizabeth Warren was starting a sort of wind down. Also, by the way, somebody noticed, as a funny aside, looking at Trump's tweets last night, that not only did Trump's analysis of the Warren speech match mine, Trump also seems to be adopting my pronunciation of Pete Buttigieg, tweeting, quote, Boot edge edge, parentheses, Buttigieg, is doing pretty well tonight, giving crazy Bernie a run for his money. Very interesting. I would be shocked if Trump is actually getting that from me. That would definitely be something else. So let's talk delegate totals. Delegate totals as of right now, as I told you, insignificant in terms of the delegate math. You need 1,990 delegates to secure the nomination. All that the current numbers tell us is that we are starting to see enough of a split in the delegate math that if this trajectory continues No one will get to 1990, and it will be a contested convention. We'll deal with that in more detail tomorrow. But looking at totals, Pete Buttigieg now with 22 delegates. He has his 13 from Iowa, plus 9 from last night. Bernie Sanders with 21 delegates. He has his 12 from Iowa, plus 9 from last night. Warren has 8, Amy 7, and Joe Biden 6. Nobody else has any delegates. Note that for now, Bernie Sanders has won the raw vote in 100% of the primaries and caucuses, Iowa and New Hampshire, but Bernie Sanders is not winning the delegate math, and that is firing up many, many people. Andrew Yang did drop out yesterday after an abysmal 2.8% in New Hampshire. We're going to talk about that a little later. But now we go on to a presidential debate next Wednesday. That'll be followed by voting in the Nevada caucuses on Saturday, February 22nd. Then voting in South Carolina on Saturday, February 29th, and then on to Super Tuesday, March 3rd, which I believe will really give us a sense of, is the trajectory continuing to look like a contested convention? Are there really two contenders? Right now, it's Bernie and Pete, but you've got a bunch of people that are still relatively close, just a few delegates separating everybody. Let's look at those upcoming primaries and caucuses. We really don't know what the hell is going on in Nevada because the last poll is a month old. At that point, Biden was +1 over Bernie. That was a month ago. Anything could happen in Nevada. Would love to see some new polling there. South Carolina has been widely expected and assumed to go to Joe Biden for a while now. The latest poll is 10 days old, and it has Biden +18. I do believe South Carolina is essentially a must-win for Biden. Now, realistically, Biden will stay in at least until Super Tuesday, because anything could happen on Super Tuesday. But Biden is not going to do well on Super Tuesday unless he can gain momentum by securing the win in South Carolina that he has long been expected to get. If he doesn't get South Carolina, the Biden path starts to narrow even more than it has already narrowed. Not to mention that Elizabeth Warren has to start picking up delegates. She's polling 4th in South Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised to see her end up with 0 in South Carolina. Remember that, like with most primaries, there's this 15% viability threshold in South Carolina. If you don't get 15%, you get 0 delegates. Right now, Warren is polling 8 in South Carolina, not looking good. So there are now, in reaction to yesterday's Bernie win over Buttigieg, there are all sorts of hot takes about what does New Hampshire mean for Bernie? What does it mean for the nomination? And the reality is that you can spin this almost any way you want, and a lot of people are. So let's go through now. Later, we'll talk about Yang getting out and who else should get out. Let's now talk about the hot takes being floated around under the guise of being enlightened think pieces.